Let's talk about the story that you shared with me about your mother and sort of the vision that you have and the mission you have related to this. I think that would be really interesting to share with the audience.
So my mom at 44, so my mom was, grew up in the 50s and 60s. She got out of high school and she wanted to become a police officer. And this was in the, early 60s. And, women just weren't becoming beat cops or detectives. And so she followed a different path and, life changes, things change. And in her 40s, her father, who was a homicide detective for 30 years, retired, came to her and said, they've lifted the age ban, Christy, and you can go into the LAPD or Los Angeles Police Academy. And she said, great, I'm going to do it. And she had just graduated college too in her 40s. So she comes home and tells me she's going to now go into the LA Police Academy. And what do you think I say to her? This is midlife crisis. Are you crazy?
Hello, and you are listening to Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. I interview leaders who inspire me in the areas of exponential technologies, business innovation, entrepreneurship, thought leadership, enterprise IT security, neuroscience, philosophy, personal development, and more. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Bill Murphy, your host of the Red Zone podcast. My guest today is Kelley Steven-Waiss. And what I love is this is a woman who's really at the pinnacle of her career. And what I love is that you will, as a leader, be able to see, how is Kelley dealing with the human resource issues that we're facing in the marketplace, that both of the skilled resource challenges, being able to find talent, train talent, how you create engagement, how you create a culture that is a powerful culture that's both a profitable culture, but it embraces the new workforce all the way to the older generations in the workforce. And she does this right now with Here Technologies, which is a multiple thousand user organization. And she's done that with Extreme Networks and integrated device technology and PMC-Sierra. And she's been responsible for global human capital, human resource strategies for all those companies. And she's also on the board of Form Factor, which is a publicly traded company in California, and the chair of the advisory board of Silicon Valley Education Foundation. So Kelley is incredibly accomplished. And what I love also, in which you're going to really enjoy hearing, is that Hitch is literally an endeavor within the Here Technologies umbrella. So she founded and solved a problem of using AI and machine learning to find and source talent within our organization. But now it's actually generating revenue and is being sold to other companies as well. And so that's often what we talk about within this innovation mindset, is how we're doing this within organizations. And Kelley's a perfect example of this, of how she brought an idea to solve a problem up. She solved a problem within her own organization, and now it's available for sale and purchase to others. And she just released a book that is available on pre-order now, to be released in April, called The Inside Gig: How Sharing Untapped Talent Across Boundaries Unleashes Organizational Capacity. And what I love is Kelley has this abundance mindset. And one of the things she is really coaching leaders through this book is look at your availability of talent from within and reverse a scarcity mindset and look at this abundance of talent that we have. We've taken on these exponential technologies that give us the ability to have 10x growth, but we have to lead a different way. We have to lead from an abundance mindset, one in which we approach workers from a different perspective, not a command and control, but from understanding workers' whole selves, because that creates a unlock and it creates a shift and a powerful change in the leadership paradigm. So we cover a lot of ground in this conversation, and you're going to find nuggets and snippets throughout. And I'm really, really looking forward to getting feedback from all of you. And I want to welcome you to my conversation with Kelley Steven-Waiss.
All right, Kelley, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So we've got to get started with probably the best word I've heard recently, which is jungle gym careers. And so tell my listeners a little bit about yourself. I've already done a little bit of a brief intro on before we get started, so they know a little bit about you, but let's talk about kind of where you've gone and how you've navigated this jungle gym career experience that you've had and what you think the future of work is.
Yeah, so I am probably a very non-traditional, born in the wrong era person because, throughout my career, it was never about the ladder. So to use an image, it was the jungle gym, right? It was about feeling a sense of progression. And when I was 20 years old, my very wise grandfather said, do what you love and the success will follow you. And I really took his advice, throughout my career as I was presented with opportunities that sounded interesting. For example, I was in retail for 12 years. I was in the field. I was, building stores, and we were about at Gap to open Japan. And they said, wow, you've kind of refined our training in the field. Would you like to help open Gap Japan or do something different? And I always raised my hand. I raised my hand for the most challenging. When everyone would step backwards, I would lean forwards. And I think taking a lot of those risks really helped. So that idea that you can progress without just a promotion is something that I think we're going to see more in the future of work, because the future of work is about this portfolio of experiences. And that if you think about having a toolkit of skills and you're constantly developing new ones and putting them in there, that's the new deal with your employer, is how do you continue to build those skills? And in many cases, it might be going sideways, not necessarily going up, but in going sideways, you actually can make more money. You can ultimately progress.
So what's caused this, Kelley? I mean, you're at the pinnacle of a career of talent management as the CHRO. So talk a little bit about where you are right now, and then what got you to that point? Like you mentioned, going sideways and potentially is the new forward. Where have you experienced that in your experience?
The sideways is the new forward. So I have always colored outside the lines in the roles that I've been given. So I've always had a vision for myself that is, I'm going to learn the most I can, but I'm always also going to provide the most value. I'm going to try to connect dots where other people are not seeing them. And I think having that vision has really helped me throughout my career. And so in my current role as a CHRO, one of the things that I saw is an opportunity to drive the agile transformation for HERE Technologies by a new talent operating model. And I talk a lot about that in my book called The Inside Gig, which comes out in April, is that the new model is to unleash the talent from the inside. So there's so much untapped talent. There's so many hidden skills. And if we think of skills in sort of a supply chain, right? And if we're in supply chain management, we manage inventory of product. If we're in skills supply chain management, we want to be able to forecast what we need, see what we have today, understand our gaps. And if we're really going to, with the shelf life of skills being 2.5 years to 3 years, we're going to have to move people around. And today there just wasn't a way to do that easily that wouldn't create chaos. And so while at HERE, drawing outside those lines, I moved sideways and started developing a technology that I thought filled that gap in the market and certainly would help HERE become more agile, stand up more agile teams, give people more cross-functional exposure, do learning on the job, all those things that would enable that transformation from mapping and navigation to a platform company.
Is that where you invented the hitch technology? Is that where that? Okay.
Exactly. So the genesis of that technology was obviously the problem to be solved, and it was called the HERE Talent Platform. And we used the methodology of talent sharing across the organization to build that proof of concept. So we, quote, ate our own dog food to build the technology. So we got a core team together. We presented that proof of concept to the CEO. We deployed a pilot in early 2017. And then by June of 2017, we rolled it to the enterprise. It was called the HERE Talent Platform at the time. later on, as I do a lot of speaking on the future of work and I'm out talking to different consortiums, et cetera, people said, hey, I want that. I need that, because clearly it was a gap in the market, and we've now commercialized that. And we'll end 2019 with 7 external customers. So clearly, and you can see by the news yesterday that Josh Bersin said that, Workday was throwing a cannon into the HR technology market. This idea of the internal talent marketplace or intermobility is becoming very important.
It's interesting. We talked a lot about on the innovation group that I run for chief information officers, that they and the innovation at the edge and organizations, and how do we have an entrepreneurial mindset, and then how do we act entrepreneurially as like an entrepreneur, an internal entrepreneur. And it seems to me like you've sort of taken an entrepreneur gear for yourself and really launched from an incubation and an idea into something that's going to be a meaningful new product line for your organization.
Yeah, and if we think about what an entrepreneur really is, an entrepreneur has the ability to see what is missing in the market and be able to build it. And I think that the difference between the entrepreneur and the intrapreneur is that when you incubate something inside of a company, it is because you are developing something that has value in context, that is filling a gap in context for that organization. Now, in the case that you can actually create something that has value or extends beyond the lines of your organization, like Hitch, is that as a CHRO of many other companies, I'm looking outside the window and saying it's not just here that's going through massive transformation, having their business model disrupted, having talent challenges. If we think about GDPs going down into single digits despite technology advancing, a 50-year low in unemployment, engagement at all-time lows across, globally, clearly this is a problem to be solved that extends much broader than my own organization. So that's really the difference. And the people have asked me about incubating inside of another company that's so difficult, but actually it's being able to see that maybe the problem that we've solved at Here Technologies is actually also outside these walls.
So did you go at this thinking you were just solving your own internal problem first, and then it took on a life of its own? And can you take me through the process that you had identified the problem? You're obviously very uncomfortable with the problem. Like, how did you pull this together? Like, how did you?
So I actually had this idea before I walked into the doors at Here, and my CEO at Here and I actually discussed this because he himself is an accredited investor. So I think he has an opinion about businesses and the ability to evaluate opportunities. And I told him that I saw that there was a gap in the ability to give people the jungle gym career experience. There's no way to move people around inside a company, that we don't have visibility to skills. If you think about if a CEO were to ask me, and they have in the past, how much data science capability do I have? What HCM systems could tell me, or human capital management systems could tell me, is all the titles. It could tell me everybody that has a data science title, but not the capability. What he's asking me is, what is my supply against the demand that I have? So he's asking me a supply chain question, and I can't answer that in the system today. So that's where I originally started. And then when the CEO was describing the challenge at Here, what he was looking for in transforming the company, the light bulb went off that, wow, this could be a lab environment to road test this concept. Now, you never know if you're going to be successful, but the risk of going inside and being able to prove this and have a lab, that's probably the best thing I could do. And he afforded me that ability to test this idea, to use this technology in that context.
So I love that. When I was reading the pre-release version of your book, I was struck by the talent management is looking at titles, people's traditional titles. And I could see, okay, that's going to miss a whole ton of real valuable context about that human being. So other than just interviewing people one at a time, But when you're running a multi-thousand person organization, how do you scale those interviews to get context? And then they're always changing. So how did you go about gathering the information? And then from a person listening in, how would they gather the information that's necessary to look at context around human beings?
Well, companies always say, bring your whole selves to work. We want to give you a great experience, but then they put you in a box. And then if you're really good at being in that box, they want to keep you there even longer. So I think, if you're like me, I have felt sort of confined, and that's why I've had to draw outside the lines. And so I assume that a lot of people feel that their job description today does not represent them. So that was my hypothesis. So if I could create almost a LinkedIn system from the inside, but much more personal than you would put on LinkedIn. So this is now, what is the work I most love to do? What's my elevator pitch? What's my marketing of myself? Me Inc. in a system, in a safe environment, which is
I get it.
Vibe, right? And then stand up and make the work visible, and now use the technology to dynamically match and reach out to me. And people laugh, but I say it's like Tinder at work. It reaches out to you on your mobile device and says, hey, Bill, would you be interested in this opportunity? It looks like you know a thing about communication and podcasting. We have a need to do this podcast next week, and you'd be the guy. So you tap into that, you look at it, and if you're interested, you apply. So kind of the exchange of value concept, that I'm willing to give you my data and market myself, but what's in it for me? And that became the marketplace.
No, a light bulb went off for me when you talked about like an internal LinkedIn, but with a deeper understanding of the human being. And then you could literally have a machine really assist. So this leads us to the next question. So I believe, and I hope that this is in concurrence with what you believe, but maybe it's not. I think that the ditch diggers in the 1900s were really unhappy when backhoes and excavators all of a sudden came on the scene, because all of a sudden the ditch diggers said, well, we can't just dig ditches with our shovels anymore because we got machines to help us. Mm-hmm. And I kind of look at this changes we're going through now is that these automated assistant type tools that are being developed are going to be assisting humans, not replacing humans. So I'd love to get your answer to the question about human beings and machines assisting with this, and just kind of what your general thought is on the future work related to that.
And this gets into scarcity versus abundance methodology and thinking, because I think that general in the media, it's been beware, the machines and the robots are taking over, and one day they're going to kill all of us and they're going to kill our careers. And, that's just the wrong way to look at it. This is how I look at it. In the abundance mindset, I look at it that machines are taking over work that we may not want to do anymore, and we may be able to do something more skilled or at a better level or faster or cheaper because that machine is assisting us. All the jobs that are taken away, they'll have so many more jobs created. Now, the problem in the backhoe situation is that probably the people no one went to the ditch diggers 18 months in advance and said, because they had the ability to forecast that, hey, we're going to have this great machine that's going to take over this really backbreaking work that you're doing, but we're going to reskill you to do something really cool and different, and we're going to transfer this particular area of expertise you have and to do something else, and prepare them. And we are decimating communities and the economy if we don't get in front of that. If you're a Cisco or you're GM or you're any of these large employers in these communities in critical mass, you have an obligation, a social obligation, to go in and reskill and upskill with some window in advance. It's not scary. It's actually should be an exciting time for us where we can do more meaningful work, more purposeful work than some of the things that we're doing today more manually.
So how do you, as the top of the food chain as a CHRO, how do you coach people, or how do you respond when people say, well, it's hard to reskill, and of course the A performers, they're always learning and they always want to learn and they're always like, it's a part of their DNA. But then you have the resistors or the people, I just turned 50 this year, so Like I'm constantly telling the folks that are in the group, in the CIO community, listen, forget the old ideas of being an executive. You need to reskill, relearn, and prepare for the next 20, 30 years. But there's a resistance that I feel about this. And so how do you handle the resistance? What is your response back to people when they say, I thought I could just learn everything I need to know in college, and now I'm hearing I have to double down on my learning?
Well, number one, we have to tap into people's passions. And
Okay.
I think if we're going to get them interested in what's next, we need to make what's next transparent, and we need to tap into, and sometimes with even, I know when I walked out of college, I was totally confused. I mean, I had learned a trade. I studied journalism. I was a great writer. But okay, how do I apply that if the journalism jobs aren't showing up? Because it was 1991. So now welcome to the 50 over 50 club. That's what I'm hoping to win, which my husband laughs at. Yeah, it was the recession. So
remember that.
How many times did you interview? And they said, well, thank you so much. When we have a job, we'll give you a call. So I was forced to think about what transferable skills do I have? What interests me? Because grandfather said, do what interests you. So I went into a business that I grew up in. I'm like, well, I know retail. So I'm going to go be the best. I went into because I had a college degree, the partner program at the limited corporation, went into their management program and said, I am going to learn business because that I believe will have value. And I'm going to be the best I can at that point in time. And I'll tell you, it was one of the best decisions I made because I learned operations and merchandising and dealing with people, managing people older than me, younger than me, and dealing with customers on a daily basis, the grumpy ones, the happy ones, the dissatisfied ones. And I'll tell you, that really prepared me for the jungle gym career.
So how do you coach? How do you spend time talking to people about the fact that a lot of companies went from this model of I'm going to push everybody out and they can work from their house, and we're going to be super egalitarian and kumbaya about it. And all of a sudden now people are pulling back in with more disruption. It seems to me that with the more disruption a lot of the businesses are facing, now they're realizing they've got to pull in, but I'm not sure what happened. I'm sure you know what happened. I'm not surprised it's happening, but what's your thought on the whole thing?
I think that our mistake, because I remember when Marissa Mayer sent out the memorandum that everyone must come back to work at Yahoo, and
right.
all the CHROs were up in arms because we were all about work from anywhere and how dare she do this and how terrible. I think that we have a tendency to look at this in black and white, and it's gray.
Okay.
And we forget to ask the people themselves, what is the best way for you to do your best work? And it's different from everybody. Some people for them, the tribe is about sitting around a table face to face in a conference room. And for others, it's give me telepresence and I'm totally cool because I need to be at home to balance. I do better in my little cave and my own setup. So back to the point that if you're going to bring your whole selves to work, we need to know more about you to deliver that more personalized, customized experience. It's not a one size fit all. And we have technology today to bring us closer, to allow a face-to-face experience. If somebody has said, I'm actually okay using technology for my tribal experience, then that's okay. And I think, again, we just keep rotating to one angle or the other and not understanding that it might be a combination of both.
So why can't we just tell people, like back in the 90s, here's your job and just do it? We're certainly 30 years beyond that, but why? There's something at play right now which makes that model not work, and these shifts are happening. And I'm in the back of my head, I'm wondering, is it just the exponential change? Is there just too much change happening too quickly? So we just the whole paradigm needs to shift, or maybe there's something else that maybe you could talk to that I'm missing.
So one of the things, and I'll attribute this to Josh Bersin, but one of the things he talks about is that the leadership model across the industrial revolutions is shifting. So it's not just technology that's advancing. Like, we have to advance also our leadership style and model. So when work was repetitive, the command and control structure hierarchy works. And flip to now, which he calls the trusted enterprise, I call it the self-actualized enterprise, is that it's no longer about jobs, it's about the work, and the work being broken into tasks. And the expert you mentioned earlier to me in a prior conversation about, I want a combination of the Upwork people and my tribe from inside. That is the new model because it's about the work. And if we have the luxury of, I need this tomorrow and I need an expert on it, of going and getting that, but I don't need them all the time and I don't need them on my payroll, we should be able to do that. And we are at a pivot point in the future of work where we are going to see, and we need to apply so many different models at one time. We have multiple generations at work. We have different layers of communication acumen. We have different types of technology and applications. So this can be a very confusing time, or it can be, massive amount of enlightenment. But we have to evolve our leadership model commensurate with where we are in this evolution. And we keep, that toddler toy that's, you put the square in the square and the triangle in the triangle, and you see a toddler trying to put the triangle in the square and then throwing the toy across the room because they're frustrated. Many HR professionals, many leaders and managers and employees are frustrated because we keep taking an old model and shifting it into a new model. And we have to completely change. We just keep trying to do the same things, and then the same things aren't going to work.
Because it's interesting, you referenced Abraham Maslow, and of course hierarchy of needs was his big thing. And you had mentioned bringing your whole self to work. And that just wasn't the paradigm you bring in. I mean, it was not the paradigm, but it's funny that exponential change, this 10x growth that everybody keeps referring to, you can't do 10x growth. It's funny, when I first started listening to Singularity and the whole abundance mantra, I thought, God, this is great. Wouldn't it be great to think in a 10x manner? But it forces it. We have these very powerful technical tools, which are easily 10x, but our thinking and our operating and our leadership isn't keeping pace, is it?
Correct. So that's why we're having disruption from so many different places. And, I would argue that even on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's one that I always put up when I'm speaking that makes the audience crack up, but it's true, is Wi-Fi. At the bottom of the triangle is Wi-Fi. And what I mean is, like, if we aren't connected to a device or to a whole swath of individuals via social media, we feel like, the sky is falling on us and we can't survive. I mean, ask a 19-year-old if he can do without Wi-Fi for the next 12 months, and you'll probably find no. Right? Absolutely.
Well, you and I both have kids that are roughly the same age, from the stack from college down through the teenage years and younger. I'm curious, what do you tell the kids at kind of that top end of the teenage group that are going to be quickly into the workforce? I often, as an entrepreneur, I kind of enjoy talking about the challenges of entrepreneurship and dealing with people, because I want my kids fully understanding that today. But I'm curious, because you have a whole different lens as well of seeing high performers, low performers, all types of different performance and the skills that you're having to retool. What do you tell your kids?
Yeah, I tell them that the way to set themselves apart in the future is communication skills. There will be a dearth of communications acumen in the future. And if there's one thing they need to practice is communication, dealing with human beings face to face, carrying a conversation, the lost art of conversation. I had to tell my 19-year-old that dating was in person. It's not over text. Somewhere between IDK and LOL, there has to be a relationship. And to a room full of parents and juniors and seniors in high school at my son's, I have 2 sons and 2 daughters, but at the son's prep school, I said, your ability to carry a conversation will be the most important thing in your life, because relationships are about people, and people aren't through technology. And so for my 8-year-old that I think came out of the womb with their iPhone, this will be a challenge. This will be a true challenge for generation Y and Z.
Well, I share a similar story. My son had to have a very difficult conversation with his soccer coach. And he goes to an all boys parochial school up in Baltimore. And I laughed, and we were coaching him through it. But I love that they really forced the young men to have these hard conversations and have not the parent proxy. So we were coaching him up in the background, but he had to walk in and he had to carry a hard conversation. And I laugh, but it's such a necessary skill even today, and it can't be done in text.
Like for us, it would be death by SAT, and for them, an SAT is no sweat. I really don't want to have that conversation with the coach. I remember my son having to schedule a doctor's appointment, and he realized he actually had to call and talk to a human being. And you would have thought I was asking him to extract a couple of teeth without Novocaine. It was, and he's a very dynamic kid, right? But, this is the one thing in all seriousness that will break down our society and our financial well-being is if we can't communicate, because push comes to shove, whether we're having meetings through technology or other mechanisms, that communication is so critical. And now it's more complex because it's across geographical lines too. So we have language barriers and all kinds of things. And if we're going to move at the speed that I think the businesses are going to have to move, that we have to have that as a skill set.
I'm going to ask you a little bit of a non sequitur, but I have a sneaky suspicion it's an important question because I know I struggle with it mightily. I don't have the luxury now of hiring someone into a role. I actually have found that I have to be massively clear about the tasks and break the tasks down. It's such a detail that if I'm not really clear about the intention of the work that I want done, then it becomes muddled. And then so my question is, how important is it for leaders to understand and be clear about communication of the things that they want accomplished versus being lazy about throwing someone into a role and having them figure it out? Like, where does that play in our conversation?
Well, I think it's also probably even depends on the generations, generalizing that you're talking to. But I think people come to work because they want to be successful and have an impact. And when things move at such speed, I think we make a lot of assumptions. We lose clarity. And Peter Lencioni talks about, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And one of them is just lack of clarity, right? We have to be able to give clear instruction. I think we have to state what our expectations are. Then we can unleash people's creativity and how they go about getting to the end game. But I think also in terms of being good talent architects, if you're a leader and you're in this new future of work where you can go get an expert on the outside or you can have someone on the inside, the ability to break down work and be very clear about this task versus this one allows you to make those trade-offs about who should be doing that work. And so as leaders, the ability to communicate effectively is important. And the ability to be a great architect of talent is to understand what work should be done by whom.
Oh, because I see this in the security world all the time, and I don't laugh, but I know it's a problem, is that I see the CIOs and CISOs putting these grandiose, huge job requests out for a person that doesn't exist. Like, and if the person existed...
Unicorn job.
Yes, the unicorn job. And I know where they're coming from on it, but really that role needs to be broken down into much smaller, achievable parts, possibly outsourcing on-demand type capabilities, but then growing someone internally to help govern that. I mean, there's so many ways to tackle it, but I think that was part of the genesis of my conversation is like, I love that. That's another post, the unicorn position.
Yeah. Good luck with that, right? I don't know. It might be the person that says shoot for the moon and you might get the moon, but particularly on cyber, I mean, let's talk about that talent pool for a minute. We have a 2 million deficit of these people. So if you're in college and you're listening to this, go into cybersecurity. But, I think back to your point, cybersecurity is in itself a huge umbrella, and there's going to be expertise underneath that umbrella. So for the individuals, decide if you were the Me Inc. Brand and you have to define what you're about, know your differentiator. What differentiates you in the pool, right? And how are you going to create value? What is it that you bring to the table so that your talent architect can actually place you where you can be most successful? Because this is just an area we just don't have enough people. I mean, there's just not enough talent out there.
How much do you rely on, speaking of algorithms and machine learning and such, Colby, for example? I have gotten my own Colby. A lot of my new people we're looking at hiring have to go through a Colby and then a Strength Finders assessment just to understand where people's unique abilities are and their unique talents lie and such, and like just trying to figure out beyond the resume, like what are they coming preloaded with? So I'm curious, how much do you rely on, or would you build into the talent architecture of these services or these capabilities from third-party experts, psychological stuff?
I think it's really interesting. I think AI is going to be an amazing complement to our recruiting and onboarding as long as we keep it in check.
Okay.
It will never be, I remember the engineer saying to me over the course of my career, I just want the algorithm to tell me what the performance rating is, and then they're going to lean on that, right? I just want it to spit out an answer. Unfortunately, there's still the need for a human being to make judgment calls, to find the chemistry between yourself as a leader and the individual, to find that right fit, to ask the right questions. So as long as we use artificial intelligence for insights or deeper insights, or to ask the right question that you might not have asked because it probed something and it drew your attention to ask it, that's the right way to use AI and machine learning in recruiting. I think that I get the sense that people think that this is the panacea, like we're going to put AI in there, we're never going to have any bad hires, and it's going to solve all of our problems. That's just not true. I think it needs to be used correctly, and if you're using it correctly and effectively, it's about insights.
So let's wrap up with your book. We've been talking through some of the parts of your book, but let's talk about like the genesis of it and the story that you share with me about your mother and sort of the vision that you have and the mission you have related to this. I think that would be really interesting to share with the audience.
So my mom at 44, so my mom was, grew up in the 50s and 60s. She got out of high school and she wanted to become a police officer. And this was in the, early 60s. And, women just weren't becoming beat cops or detectives. And so she followed a different path, and, life changes, things change. And in her 40s, her father, who was a homicide detective for 30 years, retired, came to her and said, they've lifted the age ban, Christy, and you can go into the LAPD or Los Angeles Police Academy. And she said, great, I'm going to do it. And she had just graduated college too in her 40s. So she comes home and tells me she's going to now go into the LA Police Academy. And what do you think I say to her? This is midlife crisis. Are you crazy? Because I wasn't thinking about changing careers. She was an accountant at the time, which is totally different. But she went into the LAPD Academy. She was with people 20 years younger than her. She did amazing. She won the Most Inspirational Cadet Award, went up there with Chief Willie Williams at the time and her father. It was a very moving, huge milestone. 3 days out of the academy, however, my mom went to her first call and was killed in the line of duty responding to a domestic violence dispute. And of course, the media grabbed that. It was national news. President Clinton called me actually at home. Letters poured in all over the world. And those letters basically said, your mom's story about reimagining herself and redirecting her career really inspired me. And I'm going to go. I mean, these came from Asia and Europe and all over the US.
Wow.
And it occurred to me that people are more than what they're doing today. My mom had amassed so many different skills through the course of her lifetime, life skills, professional skills, and so much of that would have gone untapped. Now, she would have gone on probably to be one of the most amazing detectives that they had because of those experiences that she brought to the table. And I wanted to unleash that in everybody. I believe if every company was able to uncover these untapped skills, deal with this multi-generational workforce, wow, I mean, that could really change the game. And so the genesis of Hitch, or the talent platform, was really from that very personal story. And I'm hopeful that it changes the world.
Well, absolutely. That's your big moonshot, and there's a tremendous amount of passion behind that. And I'm glad you shared that story. So that's quite a lot of power to launch Hitch from, and quite a lot of impact at the top of an organization managing the talent that you have to. Is there anything that you really wanted to close out with today? Is there any message that you're really hoping I'd get to, or something that popped in your head as we're talking that you want to leave as a message for my audience?
Well, I think my best advice to people as they think about their careers is to not be afraid to take that role that really scares you to death. Some of your biggest learnings, your catapult moments, are going to be from the willingness to take that risk. And so I really encourage you to do that, to think about, what are my catapult moments? What is the way I might approach a jungle gym career with a lot of success?
I love that. I love the word jungle gym career. And we're actually getting close to launching the Women in Innovation here in the Washington, D.C. area event. It's going to be in early next year. And the women that we run into that are CIOs within organizations, we run into all over the mid-Atlantic, and they tend to not be the chunk of the group, but they tend to be the really super high performers when you look at kind of the talent across the board. And it's funny that when I've talked to many of them, they've taken kind of unusual paths, and they've taken advantage of different opportunities. And I think your message not only applies to women, but anybody in any career right now, is just going sideways doesn't have to be a bad thing. And it seems to me the careers are going to last longer these days as well. So maybe not being as panicked about, this is my sunset of my career, but actually I can take this wisdom and retool and rebuild for the future. And now wisdom is going to help all the younger workers coming up, correct?
Yeah. And I think, as you said, sideways is the new forward. I think we're going to live longer. We're going to have a lot longer career. I think that I grew up with parents that were sort of, you go to college, you climb this ladder, and it'll take you years and years in between of hard work. And I think we're going to see that, again, it's not the ladder that people are taking, that long career horizon will allow for small steps sideways, still progressing, by the way, maybe not getting a promotion, but progressing. And that success will have a long window. And if you were climbing Everest, there's probably lots of pathways to get there. And depending on the weather, you might go one way versus the other. And I think we need to look at careers that way. We can all plant the flag at the top. We can all be the CIO at the end, but we might have taken very different paths to get there. And how wonderful, in an abundance view, how wonderful that we are all able to get there from our own unique path. And I love this abundance mindset too. And I highly endorse the book. I can't wait for it to come out. It's called The Inside Gig: How Sharing Untapped Talent Across Boundaries Unleashes Organizational Capacity. And a big part of abundance is not being in the gap about what doesn't exist, but looking deeply into the talent that exists, and how can I mine that gold? How can I mine that untapped talent? And so I'm really looking forward for the full release of the book in the late spring. Yes, so thank you for coming on the show today, Kelley. Thank you, Bill. It's been my pleasure.
So there you have it. This wraps another episode of Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. To get all the relevant show notes, please go to our blog at www.redzonetech.net redzone.com/podcast. Additionally, make sure you go to iTunes and leave your comments in iTunes about the show. This helps our show rankings enormously, and it helps support the show. Until next time, I appreciate you very much for listening. Thank you.